OGN Plus.
Hello and welcome. We don't have a countdown of Monte Cristo on OGN Plus this week. Instead, we will be talking about the group draw. And joining me is Papa Smithy, my fellow OGN analyst colleague. Welcome. Let's talk about some groups.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
We're just going to talk about the group draw for the World Championship, who we think is going to get out, what we think might happen in these groups. So how these groups are drawn, we have the number one teams from four regions, Korea, China, North America, and Europe, all split up into different groups. Pool 2 consists of the second seeds from North America and Europe, two LMS teams, and teams 2 and 3 from Korea and China. Finally, Group 3 has the North American and European third seeds, the international wildcard teams, and each group has one Pool 1 seed, two Pool 2 seeds, one Pool 3 seed, and that is how we arrived at the groups that we have for this year's World Championship. So let's start talking about Group A. This group consists of CLG, Flash Wolves, Coup Tigers, and Pain Gaming. And a lot of people, before the CLG roster issues where they're going to have to be using Huhi in the jungle, would take a look at this group and say, wow, this is a great group for CLG and Coup, but I think it's going to be a bit more complicated than that.
Honestly, if there was a subtitle for this group, it'd be the American Dream. And that's not just a North American dream, Monty. The South American team, Pain here, look, they're not going to be favorites to advance from this group, but it's still possible.
Yeah, and people are probably sleeping on the Flash Wolves a little bit. I think Flash Wolves will struggle just because of the meta. When we talk about Stake in the top lane, he's a big weak point on this team. This is a tournament that is so stacked with carry top laners that if you are an average or below average top laner, you're really going to struggle this year.
It's just a recurring theme from the summer season onwards, the flexibility of being able to play top lane carries, and now even in the patch shift since the season ended, being able to play the Juggernauts, these new pseudo top lane tanks, top lane carries, is so important in having the flexibility to win a tournament or even advance in Worlds. I think, we've had previous Worlds where we've had AD carry metas. We've had previous Worlds where we've had mid lane metas. This is the year of the top lane, and so a mid lane focused team like the Flash Wolves, I think they're going to struggle.
The team that I'm very interested in actually in this group is Pain Gaming. So Pain, coming out of Brazil, they finished in third in the regular season of CBLOL. Then, in the Brazilian playoffs, they did not drop a single game. Then they went to the International Wildcard Tournament and won every game there as well. So they've been undefeated in their last two tournament runs. I really like the way Pain is drafting these days. They seem to have a good idea of what is powerful in this meta. Their individual players are solid, and I think Pain definitely has a shot to get out of this group, especially against a weakened CLG. Pain could take a game off CLG, they could play spoiler, and they could result in some sort of tiebreak situation where they get out against CLG.
I mean, my only cause for concern, my only pause for optimism for Pain is that a team that plays on a high macro level in an international wildcard region doesn't necessarily always compare to the world meta. When you hit Worlds, when the strategic flexibility is required, especially around level 1s, some of these wildcard regions don't have as much exposure to those differing strategies and might struggle on the world stage. But again, the American Dream is what I call the group. There is a chance for Pain and Brazil's hopes to go further than groups.
Yeah, but CLG, Huhi in the jungle, we really have no idea how this team is going to do when they're using a mid lane player that they've had as a substitute this entire summer season, but have never yet put on stage in a game. So definitely it's who shows up. As for the last team, Coup Tigers, I mean, they came through looking a lot stronger in the Korean playoffs with their strong macro style, with the fact that they have Smeb in the top lane. We talk about that top lane meta. They should be the lock team to get out of this group.
Expect to see Prey look for the initiation, because when Prey could pick up the Ash Arrow, when he could be the initiator for his team, man, it seemed to solve a lot of shot calling issues for the Coup Tigers.
One thing that I like about Coup too is that they're definitely one of the more creative teams. They will pull out very weird champion selections. So many times we've seen them really add new stuff. And on the 5.17, 5.18 patch, where so much has changed about the metagame, Coup is going to definitely have some tricks in store. Their drafting from their coach Nofei is very smart. I'm very curious what they're even going to show in the group stage, because I don't think they have to show very much at all to get out of this group. But that is something that the Coup Tigers are expert at. They prepare very well for 4 teams, and they usually are one step ahead when it comes to the metagame.
The playoffs was the debut of a clutch Koo Tigers team, and if they can keep that up, if that can be a word that's used commonly to describe the Koo Tigers, they can go far at Worlds.
Absolutely. So Group B, we've got Fnatic, we have Invictus Gaming, AHQ, and Cloud9. Interesting in that IG is so inconsistent, and you just never know which version of this team is going to show up. It's surprising that they even made the World Championship.
You say that, but the moment that the Twitterverse found out about 516, how could you not bet on an Invictus Gaming? Notably, 516 was the patch that was used for those China regionals. The moment that you include the Juggernauts, the moment that you just throw the meta under a bus and see what sticks, how could you bet against Zatai in the top lane? This guy was the innovator in mid. It's the same story in top, and although he's had a pretty steady champion pool, the moment that you add the Rannis, the moment that you give him license to play a champion like Garen, the Dariuses of the world, the Juggernauts, IG was always going to Worlds.
Sure, but I agree with you, and I think this is a great meta for Zatai to shine. But the question is, what are they going to do? They obviously have very strong jungle mid synergy with Kakao and Rookie, who have now been playing together for a couple years. But this team, I agree it's a good meta for them, but if we want to talk about consistency, we want to look at Fnatic instead. Of course, after that undefeated season, they definitely have been a significantly more consistent team than IG. If good IG shows up, certainly IG can leave this group in first place. If bad IG shows up, I think Fnatic takes first place in this group.
I mean, I can't disagree with that point. I mean, to me, the big variable is Kakao. This is a guy who famously in 2014 and previously, his jungle pathing was second to none. And if he can snowball the early game against Fnatic, in fact, pretty defensive laners, they usually play pretty passively. If he can be the wrench, if he can get Rookie a big lead in mid lane, IG do have an outside shot of topping this group, but isn't it nice for our Western fans that Fnatic really do come in favorites?
And I think the big mismatch there, you talk about Kakao, it's going to be Kakao versus Reignover, right? That's the big mismatch between these two teams. Reignover could just fold under Kakao's pressure, that's for sure. They have different priorities. Kakao, I think, has a shot to really tear into Reignover here, and if I'm IG, that's the weak point of Fnatic that I really want to be attacking. Now, the dark horses in this group, AHQ, they beat Fnatic at MSI. So there's that aspect of it. It was only a best of one, but we only have 2 best of ones in the group stage, and certainly something that could happen again.
Yeah, unique that, in one of these top regions, of course, not one of the seeded regions, but one of these top regions in the LMS is a first place team, of course. They look very strong. They have dominant lanes. They, as you said, have performed on the international stage already. Only query to me is Westo, of course, is the most notable player. He's been around a long time. If Westo is allowed or babied to get through the laning phase, or if Fnatic doesn't play a pressure game, that's their one weakness, and otherwise AHQ is so solid around the board. And if we're going into late game fight wars, you favor Fnatic, but anything can happen with AHQ.
Well, there's also the aspect that they're not going to fold under the top lane pressure either. Ziv is quite good from the top lane for AHQ, so that aspect has them in I think a good position for this tournament. But yeah, it's going to be about Westor, of course. The meta actually is looking good for Westor. Diana, Twisted Fate, champions that he's known for that are very powerful right now. So we could see that aspect of his play. This group is very hard to call because of the IG inconsistency and because we don't really know how AHQ is going to do now because it's been so long since MSI. But it is, I think, a bit of a toss-up between those 3 teams. Now, obviously, the team that almost 100% isn't going through is Cloud9. When we look at this particular group and we look at the junglers that are in play, they have a lot of experience. Reignover has been playing for years. We have Mountain, who did very well at MSI with AHQ. So Hai's jungling, his pathing was very predictable. It was very weak. He was reliant on these snowball junglers. And if you think Kakao is going to just let Hai farm up to a sated devourer Shyvana, I think you've got another thing coming.
You can't really criticize Hai for that. Thrown into an unfamiliar role, his level of play has been very impressive, and he's practicing Korean solo queue. Is that going to be enough to match someone like Kakao? No. But will he be completely exposed? My initial impression is no as well.
You take that fall for his kind of novice jungling with the fact that he does add such great shot calling in the late game. They may not win a game, but I'm also never willing to count out Cloud9's shot calling, right? They can come back. When we look at teams like IG that definitely don't have the best late game shot calling, I think there's a way that C9 can maybe sneak a game here. Group C. This group, probably the easiest one to call. We got SKT, we have EDG, two huge favorites, not only in this group, but in the entire tournament. H2K and Bangkok Titans, definitely not up to par against these two teams because they're so consistent. That's the thing about EDG and SKT. Dominant in their regions. EDG did slip up a little bit, but quickly regained their form, so I don't think we have much to worry about there.
Covering themselves in glory at MSI. A wonderful year for 2015. Sure, they'll feel bad about the fact that they're not the first seed from their region, but this is a massively strong team. And isn't it exciting that we're already guaranteed 2 matches between SKT and EDG?
I'm also happy about this because that means that because of the way that the playoffs will be drawn, of course, what's going to happen is all the first place teams will select via random drawing a second place team to play in the quarterfinals, but they can't select a team from the same group, which means that the earliest we could see a best of 5 between SKT and EDG is the semifinals, which is great because it probably means we're going to have overall a more competitive tournament.
Exactly. It's really exciting that both these teams are in this group, that we're going to have really competitive group stage games. These are teams that face off very well against each other. Plus, again, we're only focusing on 2 matches in a group stage, but SK Telecom, this is the lane dominant team. This is all about getting Marin ahead, getting Faker ahead, and then just really only taking objectives when there's so much map pressure being caused by one of these solo laners that it's a free objective against the kings of late game team fighting in EDG.
And I think what we have to ask about SKT is certainly we've seen some new stuff out of Marin, but right now he's still sort of defaulting to that Maokai pick, and we haven't seen them play on 5.16. Can he play Fiora? Can he play top lane Gangplank? These are questions we don't really know the answer to, but he's going to have to diversify his champion pool. Now, what we do know about SKT is that he gets a huge amount of the gold percentage on the team. So he gets the resources to do it. It's up to him to provide the carry threat, though. And with EDG2, they're going to have Amazing J as a sub, but he didn't play, Koro didn't play in the actual regional. We don't really know his condition either at the present time. So there's a little bit of mystery surrounding these top laners.
So yeah, it's a very top-heavy group. We definitely expect those 2 teams to advance. That doesn't mean we don't have fun storylines in the other spots. We're going to have H2K against SK Telecom T1, and that only means one thing. We are guaranteed 2 games of Faker versus Ryu.
Well, that used to be a lot more exciting than it is right now, I think, unfortunately.
Don't poo-poo it, Monty.
H2K, I don't see them doing particularly well at all. They don't match up favorably. Lulex is not really going to stand up to the heat. I mean, he has to go up in a group against Clearlove and Bengi, who are 2 of the best junglers at this tournament.
Look, some of our fans might not be familiar with just Bengi's rise and just his impressive performance in that final. To me, he was the MVP of the final.
Absolutely agree.
And look, he had plenty of deft hands doing wonderful jobs. The likes of Faker and Marin were really on point, but Bengi in particular looked outstanding. Even on a champion like Elise, played it great. His skill shots, for the most part, were very much on point. And Lulex, as you mentioned, will struggle.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to have to look at here is because Bengi is a very streaky jungler. Sure. In the past, when he's on, he's really on, and when he's off, he's really off. But right now, he's really on, and I think he'll carry through that performance through the World Championship. I think SK Telecom's going to win the whole thing, especially because now we know they're in a group with EDG, so they're not going to have as tough an opponent in the quarters, more than likely.
When it comes to his pathing in particular, his pathing is the best in the world, and he showed that against KT Rolster. Bengi's form solidifies SKT as my vote as well.
And Bangkok Titans, I mean, they're definitely the weakest team at this tournament. I was watching their games in the International Wildcard Finals against Chiefs. Those games were really bad. They didn't really live up to the expectation that we would have liked to have seen for any team going into Worlds. Many, many mistakes from both sides in those games. So I think that Bangkok Titans not going to pick up a game here. It's unfortunate. I would hope that we would have seen more of a Pain-style performance from the other international wildcard team. It just didn't happen. We move on to Group D now. Starting with LGD, KT Rolster, TSM, and Origin.
Group of death.
D is for death. Definitely. I mean, I said this on Twitter. I don't see TSM winning a single game in this group.
I mean, it's a bold prediction, but when you look at their opponents,
It's not a bold. What are you talking? It's not a bold. It's so easy, Papa Smithy. You're going to make the same prediction right now. Is TSM going to win a game?
there's an outside chance that they could win a game. Look, you're making it sound like
There's
I'm
an
saying
outside chance that a meteor is going to strike you down from space right now. All right. Let's
It's feeling likely at this present second.
just make the. Do you think TSM will win a game in the group stage?
But that's a different question. No.
Yeah.
Is there an outside chance they take a game off Origin? Yes.
Here's the main factor. We'll go back to the top lane thing right now. Dyrus is in a group with Soaz, Flame, Acorn, and Someday.
That's 4 top laners, because of course LGD's sub is Flame, another noted top lane carry.
When we talk about this top lane carry meta, this is an extraordinarily stacked group for top laners. Soaz was performing great in the Gauntlet, great in the EU playoffs. He really looks solid right now, and that's going to be a major factor. And I just don't think that in this meta, this is something that TSM can really even begin to deal with.
Look, I can't disagree with that. Darius is one champion that Darius has shown proficiency on. Again, we're talking about many years ago at this point, so there's an outside chance that the likes of the Garen, the likes of the Darius, could be a factor and he could look competitive, but to say he's outmatched is by no means an overstatement. It is a very tough group for TSM. They will probably not pick up a game, but to completely write them off and say they couldn't pick up one game, it's an outside chance, but it's a possibility.
Origin looking a lot better. Yes. I mean, they came off of a season where they did well, but sort of faltered in the late game, even though they had strong early game skirmishing. And they took a Fnatic team that was undefeated in the regular season and took them to 5 games. They cleaned up the Gauntlet pretty efficiently, whereas I would say that the story of this summer split for TSM was one mostly of decline from the beginning and then a brief uptick at the end, but the finals ended very poorly for them. So Origin, I think, is going to put up a fight here. I really do think so.
I really hope Xpeke has been practicing. He looked pretty poor in that final.
Yeah.
And he's a very passive laner. That's my only worry for them, because as you mentioned, Soaz has been overperforming, showing new champions, going to champions he said he'd never play, and even playing the likes of the Shen.
So I think that Origin, they may be able to steal a game from LGD. They may be able to steal a game from KT. And LGD, in spite of their strong run in the playoffs, absolutely destroying EDG, taking out QG, this is still a team that has been having coaching issues, and we don't really know what their prep is going to be.
So what about KT Rolster, though? They're the one team we haven't discussed. The 3rd place finishers in Champions, but they've got Someday. And to me, he's the star player, one of the star players of Worlds. If I had to pick players to watch, he'd be my number 1, because carries, tanks, the Juggernaut, throw anything at this man. He's been around the competitive scene for a long time, but man, he's hit a massive amount of form coming into Worlds.
Yeah, and that's going to be very interesting too, because we're looking at Acorn versus Someday. Acorn, one of the best top laners from 2014, going up against one of the best top laners from this year. Acorn and Flame have continued to look good, so it should be a very interesting test. Now, for LGD, obviously Imp did a huge job carrying that team recently, looking absolutely amazing, certainly a step above Arrow, but when it comes to LGD2, they have PYL, their noted shot caller, very strong support player. PYL versus Peekaboo is going to be a very interesting matchup in terms of who can get more control over the map.
I mean, just mention the 4 supports in this group. All of them deserve high levels of respect for their careers. Peekaboo, even Lost Boy, who struggled a little bit in the summer season, has been a great support. You look over to the likes of PYL, and Mithy is a wonderful roaming support and a cornerstone of Origin strategy. So it's really a role to watch in Group D.
I think it's going to wrap up our chat about the groups here. Looks like it's going to be a good tournament. I'm a little bit sad about some of the ways the groups were placed, especially Group A against Group D. I think if we moved a couple of teams between those 2 groups could be a little bit more exciting, but other than that, it's looking pretty good.
Absolutely, and just to reiterate, both of us predicting the same thing. It's SK Telecom. There's no potential of any issues there. In a best-of-5 series, their coaching is solid, and their preparation for that KT series, and if they had that sort of same time for preparation around Worlds, this team is so scary.
And I think they are incredibly hungry for another Worlds win. I know Faker will be ecstatic about being in the same group as Pawn because he is just obsessed with beating Pawn, given the history and the rivalry of that matchup. But yeah, I think taking SK Telecom as the favorite for this year's World Championship that's my pick as well, for them to go ahead and win this year. And if we think about if they take first place in this group, who they're likely to face in the quarterfinals, I mean, could be IG or Fnatic, could be KOO or CLG.
Could be KT.
Could be KT, a team that they just beat pretty convincingly. So I think by avoiding EDG in a quarterfinal matchup, and I think EDG is probably the second best team here because I just don't have a lot of faith in LGD's current infrastructure situation, all the drama that's been happening there. Obviously, it's a lot harder to call this year than it has been in previous years because of the strength of the Chinese teams in general.
And the ultimate underdogs from the West, Fnatic, they'll be in this discussion. Will they make semifinals at least, Monte Cristo?
I think it depends on their draw, right? There's the possibility that they face Fnatic or EDG or SKT in quarters. That could be very brutal for them. It just depends on that quarterfinal draw whether they can make semis. If they do make semis, I just don't see them actually coming through, making the finals.
We've said that before. That there's a chance.
So there's a chance.
Small.
Thanks for watching. This has been a brief overview of some of the teams at the World Championship after the group draw this year here on OGN Plus. The countdown to Monte Cristo will resume during the World Championship, so we will have some more reviews of those games. I'm Monte Cristo. Thanks for joining me, Papa Smithy.
My pleasure.
All right, and we'll see you guys later.